Welcome to Summary Central. You're listening to the 30-minute summary of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. If you're new here, this is where we turn big, complex ideas into calm, thoughtful conversations you can slip into your day. No highlighters, no bullet points, just ideas that feel human. So, wherever you are right now, walking, commuting, washing dishes, staring out a window, pretending to work, take a breath. For the next half hour, you're off the hook. No to-do lists, no notifications, no multitasking, just a quiet conversation about what actually matters. Part 1, Introduction. Because Essentialism isn't a book about minimalism. It's not about owning fewer things or living in an empty apartment with one wooden chair. It's about something deeper. How to reclaim your time, your energy, and your focus from a world that's constantly trying to steal them. Greg McKeown has a simple argument. If you don't choose what's essential in your life, someone else will choose for you. And they usually won't choose well. The text is already entirely in English. We live in an age that worships busyness. People wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. Ask anyone how they're doing, and half the time they'll say boozy, as if that's a measure of importance. But busyness is a poor substitute for progress. It's activity without direction. Essentialism is about getting off that treadmill. It's about doing fewer things, but doing them so well and with such clarity that your life starts to feel both lighter and more meaningful. McKeown's central line is simple but powerful. If it's not a clear yes, it's a clear no. The text is already entirely in English. Here, it is unchanged. And if you've ever said yes when you meant no to a meeting, a favor, a commitment, or a friend who just won't stop picking your brain, you already understand why this book exists. Every yes costs something. It costs time, energy, attention, all limited resources. So the question isn't, can I do it? It's, is this worth trading part of my life for? McKeown calls Essentialism the disciplined pursuit of less. It's not about being efficient. Efficiency is doing things right. Essentialism is about doing the right things. There's a difference. You can be efficient at all the wrong things and still end up burned out, frustrated, and wondering why your hard work doesn't feel meaningful. Essentialism is about realignment, learning to separate what's important from what's merely urgent. Think about it. Urgency is everywhere. Emails that demand instant replies, text messages that break your concentration, deadlines that feel more like pressure than purpose. We respond to all of it because it feels necessary. But necessary isn't the same as essential. An essentialist steps back and asks, what would actually move the needle? They know that energy is finite and that saying yes to everything guarantees mediocrity in all of it. Let's get personal for a second. How many times have you looked at your calendar and thought, how did this happen? You said yes to one thing, then another, and suddenly your week looks like a bad game of Jenga. That's the non-essentialist life, always reacting, never choosing. McKeown's message is refreshingly simple. You have a choice. You don't have to be busy to be valuable. You don't have to do everything to make an impact. And you certainly don't have to say yes to every opportunity just because it knocks loudly. In fact, one of his strongest points is that the word priority was originally singular. For 500 years, it meant the one thing of first importance. Then, somewhere in the 20th century, we invented the plural, priorities. And that tiny change revealed the problem. We started believing we could have many first things. The essentialist disagrees. They pick one. That might sound restrictive, but it's actually freeing. Because when you know what matters most, decisions become easier. You stop debating every little choice. You stop letting the world pull you in 1,000 directions. You start saying no with clarity instead of guilt. You start to breathe again. Let's be honest, saying no doesn't come naturally. Most of us grew up being rewarded for saying yes. We were praised for being team players, hard workers, reliable. We learned that yes earns approval and no sounds selfish. But McKeown flips that thinking completely. He says the real selfishness is spreading yourself so thin that you can't give your best to anyone, including yourself. Saying no, he argues, is an act of respect, both for your own time and for the importance of the things you've already said yes to. And this isn't just about work. Essentialism applies to everything: relationships, goals, even personal growth. If you're chasing 10 self-improvement projects at once, you're not improving, you're just multitasking your anxiety. Essentialism invites you to slow down, to choose deliberately, to trust that less really can lead to more clarity, more energy, more meaning. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together. Over the next few parts, we'll unpack the mindset of an essentialist, how they think differently, how they make choices, how they protect their energy, and how they live with a sense of calm purpose in a noisy world. You'll learn that essentialism isn't about doing less for its own sake. It's about making the highest possible contribution to what truly matters. So if you've ever felt stretched too thin, constantly busy but rarely fulfilled, this summary is your invitation to pause, not to do nothing, but to start doing the right things. Because your energy is precious, your time is finite, and your attention, that's your real currency. So spend it wisely. And hey, while you're here, if this kind of calm reflection hits differently than the usual hustle culture noise, follow or subscribe. It tells YouTube that you like thoughtful conversations, not chaos. Now, take another breath. Shake off whatever clutter you brought into today. Let's start exploring how to build a life that's full, not because it's packed, but because it's purposeful. Up next, part 2. The core mindset. We'll look at the key difference between how essentialists and non-essentialists think, and why that single difference determines whether your days feel peaceful or pressured. Part 2. The core mindset. Let's begin with a truth we all know but rarely admit. Most of us are terrible at saying no. We nod, smile, agree, overcommit, and then wonder why we feel like our calendar is slowly plotting against us. You know that moment when someone asks for just a quick favor, and before your brain can intervene, your mouth says, sure? Then later that night, you're lying in bed thinking, why did I do that? Yeah, that's the non-essentialist in action. Greg McKeown calls this mindset the default setting of modern life. It's what happens when we mistake busyness for importance and motion for progress. We've built an entire culture that celebrates people who can juggle more balls without ever asking whether any of them matter. And the result? We end up overextended, underfulfilled, and secretly wondering whether all this activity is actually adding up to anything meaningful. That's where the essentialist mindset comes in. It's not about doing less for the sake of less. It's about doing less, but better. It's a philosophy of focus, a refusal to waste your limited time on things that don't serve your highest purpose. McKeown says, the way of the essentialist means living by design, not by default. And that one sentence changes everything. Because think about it. How much of your life right now is the result of conscious design? And how much is just momentum? Old habits, inherited expectations, things you said yes to 2 years ago that still quietly run your schedule today. The essentialist pauses long enough to ask, what do I actually want my life to be about? They stop confusing activity with accomplishment. They understand that saying yes to everything is the fastest path to mediocrity in everything. Let's look at the difference more closely. The non-essentialist says, I have to. The essentialist says, I choose to. The non-essentialist reacts to pressure. The essentialist responds with purpose. The non-essentialist tries to do it all. The essentialist does only what truly matters. This isn't about working harder. It's about working with intention. To illustrate, McKeown uses a simple metaphor, a circle. Imagine a circle with arrows pointing out in every direction. That's the non-essentialist. They're busy, but their energy is scattered. Now imagine a circle with one bold arrow pointing in a single direction. That's the essentialist. Same amount of energy, radically different results. When you see it that way, it's obvious. Focus is power. But here's the problem. In practice, focus feels risky because focus means saying no. And saying no means disappointing someone. And disappointing people makes us uncomfortable. So we say yes to keep the peace, to look competent, to avoid conflict. But every yes becomes a quiet no to something else. Maybe it's sleep. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's time with your family. McKeown points out that the essentialist mindset starts with reclaiming the power of choice. We forget that saying yes is optional. We act like life is something that happens to us rather than something we shape. Essentialists take that power back. They stop saying, I have to, and start asking, do I even want to? And that shift from obligation to ownership is everything. Let's put it in real terms. Imagine two people at work. Both are given the same new project. The non-essentialist immediately says yes, even though their plate is already full. They rationalize it. I'll figure it out later. A week later, they're exhausted, resentful, and doing mediocre work on everything. The essentialist pauses. They ask, is this the best use of my energy? If it's not a clear yes, they decline, kindly, clearly, respectfully, and as a result, they stay focused on the few things that truly matter. Who's really more productive? McKeown isn't just giving time management advice here. He's describing a fundamental shift in identity. Being an essentialist means defining success on your own terms. It means trading the illusion of doing it all for the satisfaction of doing what counts. There's a funny paradox here. The more you try to be everything to everyone, the less you become to anyone. The essentialist gets this. They know that spreading yourself thin doesn't make you generous. It makes you ineffective. And here's something interesting. Essentialism isn't cold or rigid. It's not about becoming some robot of discipline. It's about becoming human again. It's about returning to a life where you're not ruled by other people's priorities. The essentialist mindset is ultimately one of peace. You know you're living it when your days feel spacious, when your energy is directed instead of drained, when your calendar reflects your values, not your fears. Of course, it's easier said than done. The world will always reward you for saying yes. You'll get praise, approval, maybe even promotions. But the reward for living as an essentialist runs deeper. It's fulfillment. It's waking up knowing you're working on what you were actually meant to do. And that's the shift this book is trying to create, from scattered to centered, from overbooked to purposeful. It's the difference between surviving your schedule and designing your life. So, if this resonates with you, if you've been living like the non-essentialist and you're tired of feeling like life's janitor, constantly cleaning up after your own yeses, then congratulations. You've already taken the first step. You've paused long enough to notice. And that's where every essentialist begins. If you're finding this mindset refreshing, follow or subscribe, not out of habit, but because you actually want more ideas that make you feel calm and in control. Because next, we're diving deeper into the mechanics of choice. We'll talk about trade-offs, the emotional weight of saying no, and how to stop spreading your life across 1,000 half-finished projects. This is where essentialism stops being theory and starts becoming power. Up next, part 3, choices and trade-offs. We'll learn why saying no is the ultimate productivity hack and how to do it without guilt. Part 3, choices and trade-offs. Here's the truth nobody likes to admit. You can do anything you want, but you can't do everything you want. Every yes you say quietly carries a no hiding behind it. Every time you agree to one thing, you sacrifice another. That's not negative. That's reality. Greg McKeown calls this the law of trade-offs. And the sooner you embrace it, the sooner your life starts to make sense again. Because most of us live as if trade-offs don't exist. We try to make everything fit, like a child forcing extra toys into an already full box. And when it doesn't fit, we tell ourselves, I'll just sleep less, or I'll push harder. But all that pushing leads to one thing: burnout. The Essentialist sees the world differently. They know that every choice is a trade, and instead of avoiding that truth, they lean into it. They ask questions like, if I say yes to this meeting, what am I saying no to? If I spend energy here, what won't I have energy for later? If I commit to this project, will it move me closer to what actually matters? These questions don't make you less ambitious, they make you strategic. Because saying yes to everything doesn't make you successful. It just makes you tired. McKeown has a great line, you can do anything, but not everything. It sounds obvious until you try living it. Let's be honest, saying no is uncomfortable. It feels like rejection. It feels like conflict. It feels like you're letting someone down. But what's worse, disappointing someone briefly or disappointing yourself continuously? Essentialists understand that discomfort is temporary, but regret is expensive. So how do they say no? Gracefully, confidently, without sounding rude? McKeown suggests treating it like a muscle. You strengthen it with practice. Start small. Say no to a minor request, a call you don't need, a meeting you weren't required for. Then move to bigger things. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And here's a trick. Delay your yes. When someone asks for something, say, let me check my schedule and get back to you. That little pause gives you space to think. If you realize it's not essential, you can decline politely later. McKeown also reminds us that clarity makes no's easier. If you know your purpose, you can measure every request against it. If it doesn't align, it's out. No guilt. No debate. But here's where most people trip up. They confuse pleasing others with being kind. Saying yes to keep people happy often hurts both sides. You overcommit, underdeliver, and end up resentful. That's not kindness. That's avoidance wearing a smile. True kindness is honesty with compassion. You can say, I really appreciate you thinking of me, but I can't give this the attention it deserves. That's clear, respectful, and firm. And remember, saying no doesn't mean you're rejecting the person. You're simply respecting your limits. McKeown offers this mindset shift. Instead of asking, how can I do it all? Ask, what can I go big on? Because focus always requires trade-offs. Let's look at a quick story from the book. He shares the example of a successful executive who realized his company was chasing every opportunity that came along. Revenue was up, but morale was down. Everyone was stretched too thin. So he gathered his team and said, from now on, if we don't agree something is a 9 or 10 out of 10 opportunity, it's a no. The result? Fewer projects, but each one succeeded. They traded quantity for quality, and it changed everything. You can do the same thing in your personal life. Use what McKeown calls the hell yes test. If an opportunity doesn't make you say hell yes, then it's a polite no. That simple filter can declutter your life faster than any productivity app. Now, a quick but important point. Saying no will upset some people, especially if they're used to your old habits. That's okay. Boundaries are often met with resistance at first, but over time, people respect those who respect themselves. Essentialists understand this paradox. When you stop trying to please everyone, you start attracting the right ones. The people who value your focus. The people who prefer your quality presence over your scattered availability. And here's another hidden benefit. Your confidence grows. Every time you say no to something meaningless, you're saying yes to your purpose, and that reinforces it. There's a quote from McKeown that captures this perfectly. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. It's true in business. It's true in relationships. It's true in everything. Non-essentialists let their calendars fill themselves. Essentialists fill theirs with intention. This mindset of choice and trade-off is liberating. You stop chasing every shiny thing that moves. You stop saying yes just because you can. You start saying yes only because you should. And funny enough, that's when opportunities get better. Because the world starts to notice your focus. People begin to trust your yes because they know it actually means something. So the next time someone asks you to take something on, pause. Think about the trade. What will this cost you in time, focus, peace of mind, and then decide if the trade is worth it. That's the essence of essentialism. Living intentionally in a world that constantly asks you to drift. So, if this resonates, if you've realized your yeses are costing too much, take a second to follow or subscribe because we're about to explore the next question. Once you know what to say no to, how do you figure out what truly deserves your yes? That's where clarity comes in. Up next, part 4, clarity and purpose. We'll dive into how essentialists define what matters and why clarity is the ultimate filter for your energy. Part 4, clarity and purpose. Once you've accepted that you can't do everything, the next question is obvious. If you can't do it all, what's actually worth doing? This is where essentialism moves from cutting things out to building something meaningful. Because once you start saying no, you create space. And that space begs the question, what belongs here now? Greg McKeown says clarity is the compass of an essentialist. Without it, you'll drift. You'll get pulled in every direction by whatever's loudest or most urgent. But when you have clarity, decisions get easier. You stop debating every choice. You stop letting life happen to you and start happening to life. Let's make this practical. Clarity begins with purpose. And purpose isn't something you find written on a mountain or in a self-help quote. It's something you decide. McKeown suggests asking yourself 3 questions. What am I deeply passionate about? What am I uniquely skilled at? What can I contribute that would make the biggest difference? Where those 3 answers overlap, that's your highest point of contribution. That's where essentialists focus their energy. The non-essentialist says yes to whatever crosses their path. The essentialist says yes only to the opportunities that align with that intersection. Everything else is noise. But clarity isn't just about your career. It's about the story you're telling with your life. Because whether you realize it or not, every decision adds a sentence to that story. The question is, do you like how it's being written? The question is, do you like how it's being written? If not, you can edit. You can always edit. Let's take an example. Imagine 2 people. One spends their time chasing every new project, new app, new goal. They're busy from dawn to dusk, always in motion, but never sure where they're going. The other spends time identifying what truly matters, their core priorities, their why. Then they organize their life around that. Guess which one feels more fulfilled at the end of the day? Clarity is like GPS for your energy. Without it, you'll burn fuel wandering in circles. With it, every movement has direction. And here's the kicker. Clarity doesn't mean knowing everything. It just means knowing what matters most right now. McKeown says, the clearer we are about what is essential, the easier it is to eliminate what is not. He tells the story of executives who spend hours debating what their company's priorities should be. Plural. When pressed to choose just one, they freeze, because choosing one thing feels like losing everything else. But that's the trick. Clarity is costly. You can't have it without sacrifice. When you decide what matters most, you have to accept that some good things will be left behind. That's the courage of essentialism. Now let's talk about how to build clarity. It's not a lightning bolt moment. It's a practice, a daily habit of checking in with yourself and asking, am I spending my energy on what actually moves me forward? Try this exercise McKeown suggests. Write down everything that currently demands your attention. Then, circle the top 3 that truly matter. Now, and this is the hard part, cross out everything else. Not because those things are bad, but because they're not essential right now. This doesn't mean you'll never get to them. It just means you're creating focus in this season of your life. McKeown also talks about the power of having a mission statement, but he warns against making it abstract or corporate sounding. It should be personal and practical. A simple line that helps you decide what's a yes and what's a no. Something like, I create work that inspires clarity and calm, or I help people make better choices. Your mission statement doesn't have to impress anyone. It just has to guide you. Now, once you have clarity, something amazing happens. You stop second-guessing yourself. Decisions that used to take days take minutes. You stop chasing trends and start building direction. You also stop comparing. Because when you know what your lane is, you no longer feel the need to race in everyone else's. And that, by the way, is one of the greatest benefits of clarity. Peace. You don't just save time, you save mental noise. You stop asking, what should I do next? And start saying, I already know. Now let's get real. Clarity doesn't stay clear on its own. It fades. Life has a way of clouding things, emergencies, obligations, other people's expectations. So you have to protect your clarity like you protect your time. That means revisiting your priorities regularly. McKeown suggests a simple ritual. At least once a week, pause and ask, what's working? What's wasting energy? What deserves more of my focus? These aren't business questions. They're life questions. And the more you ask them, the more aligned your days become. Here's a key line from the book. Clarity of purpose enables clarity of priorities. It's not the other way around. You don't start with a list. You start with meaning. Once you know why you're doing something, how and when fall into place naturally. And clarity doesn't make life boring. It makes it vibrant. Because when you're sure of your direction, even small tasks feel significant. Every action becomes a thread in a bigger pattern. Here's a question to reflect on. If you could only accomplish one thing this year, what would make the biggest difference? Once you know that, imagine what would happen if every yes you said supported that goal and nothing else. That's the life of an essentialist. It's not minimalist, it's maximized. Maximized for meaning, not clutter. And if you're finding yourself nodding along, realizing your days could use a little more clarity and a lot less noise, you're not alone. Most people are busy being distracted, but you don't have to be. If you're getting value from this so far, take a second to follow or subscribe. Because next, we'll talk about how essentialists protect that clarity. Because the world doesn't give you peace, you have to defend it. Up next, Part 5, Boundaries and Energy. We'll explore how essentialists guard their time, protect their energy, and learn to rest without guilt. Part 5, Boundaries and Energy. Clarity gives you direction, but direction doesn't help much if you don't have the energy to follow it. That's where boundaries come in. Greg McKeown says Boundaries are the invisible fences that protect your focus. Without them, life becomes an open field where anything or anyone can wander in. And most of the time, they do. We're trained to believe that being available equals being valuable. We answer emails at midnight, take calls on weekends, say yes to just one quick thing. But the more available you are to everyone else, the less available you become to yourself. Essentialists know that protecting their time and energy isn't selfish, it's strategic, because energy, not time, is the real currency of performance. You can have 10 free hours and still accomplish nothing if you're drained. McKeown puts it simply, we overvalue doing and undervalue being. That's why essentialists build recovery right into their design. They rest before they're exhausted, they pause before they're overwhelmed, and they say no long before resentment sets in. Let's start with time. Most people treat their calendar like a buffet. Fill every slot until there's no room for air. Essentialists treat their calendar like a museum. Every exhibit, every commitment is chosen deliberately, with space around it so it can actually be appreciated. So how do you create those margins? McKeown suggests something called buffer time. It's extra time you add to tasks and commitments because life, predictably, refuses to run on schedule. If you think a meeting will take 30 minutes, block 45. If you expect traffic to take 20 minutes, plan for 30. Those small buffers absorb the friction of reality. They turn panic into calm. Now let's talk about emotional energy. Every decision, every conversation, every small act of people-pleasing drains your battery. An essentialist asks, what recharges me? Maybe it's solitude. Maybe it's reading. Maybe it's taking a walk without your phone. Whatever it is, treat it like an appointment with yourself, because it is. Boundaries also mean limiting access. McKeown shares stories of leaders who found freedom simply by turning off notifications. One executive even scheduled office hours for messages, twice a day, 15 minutes each. Outside those windows, his phone stayed silent. Productivity went up, stress went down. You can do the same thing. Decide when you're reachable and when you're not. You'll be amazed how quickly the world adapts. Of course, setting boundaries isn't just mechanical, it's emotional. It triggers guilt. You'll feel selfish for turning down requests. You'll worry people will think you've changed. And you know what? You have. You're changing from reactive to intentional. One of McKeown's strongest lines is this: if you don't set your boundaries, others will set them for you, and they will always be in their favor. That hits hard because it's true. People rarely mean harm. They're just focused on their needs. So if you don't define your limits, the world will happily fill your schedule with its own priorities. Let's make this tangible. When someone asks for your time, don't answer immediately. Pause. Ask yourself 3 questions. Is this essential to my mission? Does it align with my current priorities? Am I the right person to do it? If any answer is no, that's your answer. And remember, boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They keep the right things in and the wrong things out. They let you be fully present where it matters instead of half present everywhere. Now, let's talk about rest, one of the most ignored essentials. We treat rest like a reward for exhaustion instead of a requirement for excellence. McKeown flips that. He says rest is what allows you to operate at a high level sustainably. Without it, your mind turns foggy, your work turns sloppy, and your decisions get reactive. In one study he cites, executives who slept less than 6 hours a night made 20% more errors in judgment. Not because they lacked skill, but because they lacked energy. The essentialist sees sleep as fuel, not luxury. They understand that recharging isn't optional. It's part of the job. And beyond sleep, they embrace play. Yes, play. unstructured, purposeless fun. It resets the brain, sparks creativity, and reminds you that life isn't an endless checklist. McKeown even calls play a catalyst for innovation. When you let your mind wander, it connects dots you didn't know were related. So, the next time you feel guilty for doing something unproductive, remember, play is productive for the soul. Essentialists also protect their environment. They design their surroundings to support their focus. That might mean decluttering a workspace, simplifying digital tools, or spending more time in places that make them feel alive. Because environment shapes energy. If your space is chaotic, your thoughts will be too. There's another important element here: people. Energy is contagious. Spend time around drained, frantic people, and you'll absorb their chaos. Spend time around calm, purpose-driven people, and you'll mirror that clarity. Essentialists choose their company carefully. They seek relationships that recharge, not deplete. One practical tip McKeown gives is what he calls energy audits. At the end of the week, list everything you did and note which activities gave you energy and which drained it. Then, in the coming week, do more of the first and less of the second. Simple, but life-changing. Boundaries and energy management aren't glamorous, but they're the backbone of essentialism. They turn big ideas into sustainable realities. Because without energy, even the clearest vision fades into frustration. So, ask yourself, what drains me? What restores me? What boundaries could I set this week to protect my focus? Pick one and act on it. Start with something small. Maybe blocking an hour for yourself each morning, or turning off notifications after dinner. Then guard that space fiercely. The text is already entirely in English. Then guard that space fiercely. You'll notice something interesting. As your energy returns, your creativity follows. Decisions feel easier. Work feels smoother. And you realize the less you fight for control, the more peace you actually have. That's the quiet magic of boundaries. And if this part is resonating with you, if you can already think of a few boundaries you've been too nervous to set, take a second to follow or share this. Because next, we'll look at how to turn all of this, the mindset, the clarity, the boundaries, into a way of living that flows effortlessly. Up next, part 6, implementation and flow. We'll learn how essentialism stops being a concept and becomes a rhythm, one that helps you glide through life instead of grinding through it. Part 6, implementation and flow. So you've made it this far, you understand the mindset, you've started saying no, you've found clarity, and you've built some boundaries. Now comes the question that really matters. How do you actually live like an essentialist? Not just talk about it, but make it your default mode. Because let's be honest, insight without action is just entertainment. You can read all the productivity books in the world, but if your life still feels frantic, something hasn't changed at the root. Greg McKeown says essentialism isn't a one-time choice. It's a habit. It's not a single decision you make. It's a rhythm you maintain. He calls this part execution without exhaustion. It's about doing what matters sustainably every single day. So, where do we start? We start with design. Essentialists don't rely on willpower. They design their environment and their routines so the right actions happen almost automatically. They don't force focus, they engineer it. Let's unpack that. Say you want to write more. A non-essentialist will say, I'll just make myself do it. An essentialist will remove friction. They'll set up a distraction-free space, open their document the night before, and schedule writing time like a meeting that can't be moved. If you want to eat better, don't rely on motivation. Clean your kitchen, prep real food, make it easy to do the right thing. If you want to focus, put your phone in another room. It's not about self-control. It's about self-structure. McKeown uses the phrase, make it easy to do the essential and hard to do the non-essential. That's the secret formula. And here's the irony. This level of discipline actually creates freedom. Because when your systems support your goals, you stop fighting yourself. You stop negotiating with distraction. You just flow. The text is already entirely in English. Speaking of flow, that's the real goal. Flow is when your work feels effortless because it's aligned with your strengths and your purpose. You lose track of time, not because you're distracted, but because you're absorbed. McKeown points out that essentialists deliberately create conditions for flow. They don't wait for inspiration to strike, they build the stage for it. That means consistent routines, clear focus windows, and meaningful goals that stretch but don't overwhelm. And when you find flow, you notice something magical. Productivity and peace start coexisting. You're not hustling anymore, you're harmonizing. But what about obstacles? Because life doesn't stop being messy when you become an essentialist. McKeown has a principle for that too. Progress over perfection. Essentialists don't aim for flawless control. They aim for consistent alignment. He tells the story of a manager who introduced a weekly essential review with her team. Every Friday they asked, what did we accomplish this week that truly mattered? What distracted us? And what will we focus on next? Over time, their work became sharper, calmer, and more meaningful. You can do the same on a personal level. Once a week, take 10 minutes to reflect. What did I say yes to that drained me? What brought me energy or joy? What will I prioritize next week? It's a simple rhythm that keeps you from drifting back into chaos. Another big part of implementation is routine. The word might sound boring, but it's the backbone of freedom. Routines remove decision fatigue. They save your energy for what really matters. Think of an athlete. Their training isn't random. It's rhythmic, predictable, disciplined. They don't wake up and decide whether to train. They just do it. Essentialists live the same way. McKeown suggests starting with a morning anchor, something that centers you before the world pulls you in 10 directions. It could be journaling, reading, stretching, meditating, anything that reminds you who's driving your day. Then build an evening reset, a ritual to close the day intentionally instead of scrolling into oblivion. That could mean reviewing what went well, planning tomorrow, or simply asking, did I move closer to what matters? The more you repeat these rhythms, the more natural they become. You'll start noticing you say no faster, choose better, and recover quicker. That's not magic. It's essentialism at work. Now let's address something people often get wrong. Essentialism is not about constant optimization. It's not about squeezing more results out of fewer actions. It's about being fully present in what's essential, which sometimes means slowing down. McKeown even warns against what he calls the paradox of hyper-efficiency. When you optimize everything, you leave no room for serendipity, no space for creative accidents or spontaneous joy. Essentialists leave breathing room for life to surprise them. That's where graceful endings come in, another core practice. Essentialists know when something has served its purpose and let it go. It might be a project, a habit, even a relationship. They understand that endings are natural, necessary, even, for growth. You can't start the next chapter if you're clinging to the old one. So, they review their commitments often. If something no longer aligns with their purpose, they bow out gracefully. No drama, no guilt. Here's a question McKeown recommends asking. If I weren't already invested in this, would I start it again today? If the answer is no, it might be time to move on. Living this way, intentionally, calmly, gracefully, leads to something few people ever experience. Sustainable flow. Your days start feeling less like an endless to-do list and more like a sequence of chosen moments. You stop chasing productivity hacks and start experiencing purpose. And you know you're doing it right when your life starts to feel lighter, not because it's empty, but because it's aligned. That's what McKeown means when he says, the way of the essentialist is the way of wisdom. So, to make this real, start today. Pick one essential thing you want to build into your life and one non-essential thing you're ready to release. Replace clutter with clarity. Replace hustle with harmony. That's how essentialism becomes a rhythm instead of a rule book. And if this conversation is helping you find that rhythm, take a second to follow or share it with someone who needs a little less chaos and a little more calm. Because next, we'll bring it all home. The last section ties everything together. Mindset, clarity, boundaries, rhythm into one closing reflection. Up next, part 7. Conclusion. We'll talk about what it actually feels like to live as an essentialist and how to start right now without waiting for perfect conditions. Part 7. Conclusion. If you've made it here, take a second to pause. You've just spent half an hour doing something rare in today's world. You've focused. You chose one idea, one voice, one message, and gave it your full attention. That, in itself, is an essentialist act. Greg McKeown says that the core of essentialism is choice. The choice to live intentionally instead of reactively. The choice to stop chasing everything and start cherishing the right things. Because life isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters. It's not about squeezing every drop out of the day. It's about protecting the drops that matter most. The text is already entirely in English, so I will return it unchanged. McKeown writes, "The essentialist does not do more things. The essentialist does the right things." And when you truly understand that, you realize that success isn't about how busy you are. It's about how aligned you are. Let's look back at what we've learned. First, the mindset. Essentialists live by design, not by default. They take back the power to choose. They stop being passengers in their own lives. Then, the method. They filter their decisions through clarity. If something isn't a clear yes, it's a clear no. They understand trade-offs and embrace them. They protect their energy through boundaries. And they build habits that turn focus into flow. And finally, the meaning. Essentialism isn't a time management system. It's a philosophy of being. It's a way of seeing life as a series of deliberate choices rather than accidental obligations. The essentialist knows that when you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing well. But when you choose carefully, life starts to feel lighter, cleaner, calmer, and ironically, more productive. McKeown shares a story that captures this perfectly. He once met a high-performing CEO who had reached a breaking point, overworked, overwhelmed, and on the edge of burnout. The man thought the solution was more efficiency. He was wrong. McKeown helped him see that the real answer wasn't doing more with less, it was doing less, period. They reevaluated his commitments, cut the non-essentials, and refocused his efforts on a few high-impact goals. Within months, his performance improved, his stress plummeted, and his team thrived. All because he finally learned to make peace with trade-offs. That's the quiet genius of essentialism. It works because it respects reality. You can't expand your time, but you can direct your energy. You can't avoid saying no, but you can say it wisely. You can't control everything, but you can control what gets your focus. And here's the surprising thing. Once you begin to live this way, the fear of missing out starts to fade. You stop worrying about all the things you're not doing because the things you are doing finally feel meaningful. FOMO is replaced by something better, JOMO, the joy of missing out. That quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you're spending your time exactly where it belongs. So, how do you start right now? Not tomorrow, not next month, now. Step 1, pause. Literally, stop what you're doing for a moment. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what's essential right now? Not next week, not in your 5-year plan, just now. Whatever comes to mind, do that. Step 2, eliminate one thing. Find something in your life that's been hanging around out of obligation. Maybe it's a commitment, a task, or even a habit. Decide that today is the day you let it go. You'll be amazed at how light you feel when you do. Step 3, protect your focus. Silence notifications for an hour. Schedule thinking time. Guard your mornings or evenings like sacred ground. You don't have to overhaul your life, just reclaim a few quiet corners. Step 4, pursue flow. Notice what makes you lose track of time in the best way possible. That's where your highest contribution probably lives. Do more of that. And finally, step 5, practice gratitude. Essentialism isn't about scarcity. It's about abundance. You start to see that by letting go of the trivial many, you make space for the vital few. And those few are worth everything. You'll know you're living as an essentialist when your days feel simpler, yet richer. When you stop checking your phone first thing in the morning and start checking in with yourself instead. When you realize that peace and productivity were never opposites, they were always partners. McKeown ends the book with a quiet truth. The essentialist life is not about doing more things, it's about doing the right things at the right time for the right reason. And that reason, ultimately, is joy. Because the point of all this, the filtering, the focus, the boundaries, isn't efficiency. It's happiness. The calm, grounded happiness that comes from knowing you're exactly where you need to be. So take this summary as more than information. Take it as an invitation to slow down, to choose deliberately, to design a life that's not crammed with stuff, but filled with meaning. You'll still have chaos sometimes. You'll still slip into busyness. We all do. But every time you remember this idea, less but better, you'll find your way back. And if you want more calm, more clarity, and more ideas that help you live intentionally, follow or subscribe right now. It tells YouTube that you're part of a small but growing movement of people who care more about depth than distraction. You've been listening to Summary Central, where big ideas become calm, useful conversations you can slip into your day. Thank you for spending your time and your attention here, because those are the two most essential things you'll ever own. Until next time, choose less, but better.